Yeah, so welcome to tonight's webinar. We're going to be looking at the concept of pooled BRR. I'm going to bring up the presentation. Right. Sorry, just one moment. Yeah, so we're going to get started. So pooled BRR. So probably quite a few of you are familiar with, let's say, standard BRR, which is buying a house below market value, renovating it, renting it out, and then refinancing. Obviously, the aim is to get an end value a lot higher than the amount of money that we put into the deal, so that when we go to the lender to refinance at the end, we're getting 75% loan to value, and we're getting most of our money out, so we can take that money and then go on to the next deal. This is fine if you got obviously the right amount of money to be able to do that. So if you're looking at some of the lower cost areas of the UK, but lower cost areas where we've still got some potential for capital growth. What I might mean by that is there are some areas like, for example, in the northeast, where the house prices are really low. We can get a house at 40,000 or 50,000. But the value of that house is likely to be the same in like 3, 4, 5 years' time. However, there are areas like, for example, Midlands, North West, like Liverpool area, South Wales, where there is quite a good potential for capital growth. So these are typically areas where we're looking to, like the lowest cost houses for the BRR model. And in that case, we're talking about an investment of £100,000 that we need to have to get this underway, typically purchasing at around 70,000, renovating at 30,000 and getting an end value of 120,000. If someone doesn't have £100,000 but has, like, let's say 40,000 to 50,000, then it's still possible to get into a BRR deal by using bridging finance or lending at the beginning of the project and refinancing at the end. However, for people that want to start getting into property but don't have the 40 to 50,000, it's possible to do what we call pooled BRR. So yeah, a lot of people when starting to invest don't have the amount of capital needed to get their own house. Pooled BRR, so this is several people coming together, but not coming together in some chaotic way, coming together in a structured way, something that's already set up, something that is legally watertight, gives like trust and confidence. So yeah, the pooled BRR, enabling anyone to get into a BRR project starting from £5,000. And so someone coming into this will have a share of ownership of the property, share of the ongoing cash flow, money back on refinancing. Typically, we're talking about 80% of the money coming back, which then people will be using probably to buy the next property. And also in the pooled BRR, people are taking part in decisions, not that many decisions, confirming that, yeah, we're going to go ahead with this property. And then later on, yeah, this is how we're going to do the refinance. So how does pooled BRR work? So we do this through a limited company, so also call this SPV, special purpose vehicle. So several people are going to come together. We're going to set up the limited company. We'll talk, I think, probably the next one about how we set up the shares in that. And for a particular project, we're going to define what the goal is. We're not necessarily going to have a specific house to buy, because it might take a few weeks for people to come together, have all the money ready to buy the property. But what we're going to do is we're going to say, give the overall plan of what we're going to get. We might say, look, we're going to buy a mid-terraced house in South Wales. We're going to buy a 2-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house. We're looking to have a total investment of £100,000, including the purchase and the renovation. We might say we're going to operate this as a standard buy-to-let, looking to get, let's say, £800 per month in rental income. We're looking to put 100,000 into it and get an end value of 120,000, and everyone's okay to stay in the deal for 5 years. So that's what we're going to say. That's the overall, the overall plan. People say, yeah, this is a great plan. We're going to come into the deal. We're going to bring money into the project so we can get the right amount of money and then get it underway. So how does it work? People are bringing in money into basically into the company, and people are buying shares in the company and putting money into the company that's going to be used for buying the property. So the total investment that the company is going to be doing includes the purchase price of the property, stamp duty, sourcing fee, which is generally 5% of the property value, legal costs. Sometimes probably actually half the time, when we're getting these properties for the BRR, we're buying properties in auction or post-auction because we can get really good deals. We're also buying properties that are for sale via agents. We can also get good deals there. So we've got the legal costs, auction fees if applicable, and then the renovation costs, including holding costs. Holding costs that mean that when we bought a property, during the period at which we're doing the renovation, we've got to pay the council tax, utilities, insurance, and things like that. And we also have a contingency. There, the plan is that when people are putting the money into the deal, we've got some additional money in case we find something during the renovation or something takes a bit longer, and we've got that contingency in there. So we haven't got to come back and say to all the shareholders, look, there isn't quite enough money, can you all add a bit? We try and plan that in advance. So individual investors are buying shares in the company, signing up to a shareholders agreement. Shareholder agreement is a legal document that defines, you want it by solicitors. We've got templates that we use from that, and then we adapt if necessary for the specific project. And then people coming in are paying there's a 5% acquisition fee. So if someone's buying shares for, let's say, £10,000, then there's going to be a £50 acquisition fee, which covers these costs of setting up the company, establishing the shareholders agreement, and the overall company management. The shareholders agreement is a critical document. It's known as a legal deed, and this defines the rights of shareholders. It explains how profits calculated and distributed, and it also explains, because we always put into the deal, into the agreement, the possibility of a buyback typically it's after 5 years, so that shareholders that want to exit the deal, there's a clear and clearly defined plan on how we're going to value the property and how shareholders can get their money out of it at the end. As an aside, you might be asking the question, what is my involvement in the deal? So in these deals, I'm not taking shares. Sometimes when it's a joint venture, it's different. then if I'm coming into a joint venture and I've done all the analysis, I'm going to be looking after everything. On something like that, I might be taking some equity in the deal in exchange for my contribution. Here it's much simpler. There's one class of shares. I'm not taking shares in the deal. I'm just setting up the structure. I can be a director if needed and obviously look after things, and the cost of that is included in the package, is included in the deal. But I'm not coming in as a shareholder. It's individual shareholders coming together, deciding on things, voting and getting everything underway. So we've got this shareholders agreement, which is a legal agreement that everyone signs up to. And then the shareholders are going to appoint a director. Generally, I'm giving that service, and myself would be director. It's also possible for someone else to be director, but that person obviously must have sufficient experience and qualification, not specifically an accounting qualification or something like that, but obviously is familiar with how companies work. He's familiar with the basics of company law, what different things have to be declared at different times, what is the responsibility of a director, and obviously must be of what we call of good standing. So that's how it works. We've got the shareholders agreement. Shareholders come on board. Those shares, by the way, will be registered at Companies House. So people that buy shares in the company will see their names there. One small thing as an aside, people often ask, and they ask this question if they're buying their own rental properties, or also the same question applies if buying shares in a pooled BRR. Do we buy these shares in personal name, or do we create a holding company to buy those shares? Generally, it's advised to set up a holding company, and we can obviously advise on that. Well, advise, when I say advise, I have to be very careful when I say that, because it's not official. It's not like legal advice. We can say this is a good way of doing it. So he's giving you the options, and then you need to either make your own decision based on the information that we're saying, or go and get your independent legal advice. So take with a pinch. Well, be careful when I'm saying advice. What we mean by that is, we're giving you the options. Obviously, I've got experience in my own properties, setting up joint ventures, both joint ventures in which I'm involved myself, and also helping people set up their own joint ventures, getting in place the heads of terms that then go to the solicitors to draft up the proper legal agreements. And then, we get down to the real stuff. So the real stuff is buying the property. So we've set the criteria. We're going to look for a property that meets those criteria. When we found it, we're going to say to the shareholders, so let's say to keep it simple, we've got 10 shareholders who have each put £10,000 into the project. We've found a suitable property. We're going to show that to the shareholders. Look, we're looking to buy this property in this town. These are the figures. Is everyone okay on that? And so everyone's going to vote. And as long as we've got a majority on that, we're going to go ahead and buy the property. So we're going to organize the renovation. The director of the company is obviously responsible for making sure that's done according to budget. And then once the renovation is done, we're going to appoint a lettings agency to let out and get the rental income. There's a note here which is an important one. Sometimes if people are buying their own property, might use some bridging finance at the beginning and then refinance at the end. In the case of pooled BRR, we're never using any finance to buy the property. So we need within the company that we're setting up to have enough shareholders and enough money to be able to buy outright the property and to be pay the total cost of the renovation, including the contingency. The reason for that, yeah, people obviously are asking that question, is it removes, first of all, a lot of the risk, because we're not thinking we've got lending, there's a bridge on there. Also, it's a little more difficult, not impossible. It's more difficult to get initial lending on when it's a company with multiple shareholders. Once the project's finished and we've got a house that's renovated, that's got the rental income always ready to rent, we can get the good valuation on it, then there's no problem in, obviously, not all lenders do it, but there are sufficient lenders out there that will lend to a limited company with multiple shareholders when we've got a clear property, a clear valuation, and it's producing income. So we're always getting together enough money, which also means that because we haven't got a bank lending at the beginning, if something does take longer, we haven't got a problem with having to get out of a bridge. We can get things sorted out. Maybe it takes a little bit longer, but we haven't got any risks there. And then when finally we get the refinance, everyone gets some of their money back. And the rest obviously staying in the deal. So yeah, refinancing and shareholder returns. So this is exactly like a standard BRR project. When we refinance, when the investor goes to the bank and refinances, we're looking to get 75% of the end value out. So if the end value is £120,000, then that's an end. 75% of that is £90,000. If 100,000 went in there at the beginning, then 90,000, that's 90% out. In practice, on the BRRs, the pool BRRs, obviously we've got a little bit more money in there because we've got some of the management fees. We've got someone looking after, we've got more legal costs, but we are in practice generally able to get 80% of the money back to the investors. The remainder of that obviously staying in the deal, and there is equity in there as well. The money that goes in for each investor there's share capital. It's not important to understand that, but some people obviously are asking that question, so it is worth having a little look at that. So let's say someone buys a share of £5,000, puts £5,000 into the company that's going to be buying the property. Then £1 of that is counted as share capital, and the remaining 4,999 goes into the company accounts as shareholders' loan. This means that when we get to the refinance and the initial shareholder is going to get around 80% of their money back, that money comes back basically as a return of the shareholders' loan, which means that that is not going to be taxable income. It's basically the money that you put in to a deal at the beginning, you've already paid the tax on there. It's your personal money, which you've got after having paid tax. So that goes in there. You're not paying any tax when it goes in there. And when you get that percentage of that money back out again, there's no tax, because it's not like additional income. You're just getting your money back, and then you can recycle that money and put it into another pooled BRR deal, or maybe you're accumulating enough money so that you can actually start your own specific one without having to go into it with other investors. So that's in a nutshell how it works. Let's see what else we got. Renovation work and contingency planning. So renovation, so on some of the deals that we're sourcing for the pooled BRR, if they're ones in an area where we specifically work and we've got our own let's build and renovation teams, then we, myself and people that work with me, will be proposing the renovation at a fixed cost, and that is including the project management. So that's option one, where work is done by a related company. In the case of work done by a non-related company, so let's say for whatever reason we're putting it out to tender, we're getting quotes in from local contractors. We've decided on one that seems to be the right one. We can't just let that contractor get on with stuff and hope that everything's going to be perfect. At the end, we have to have some level of project management on there. We have to have some level of control so that we're paying out step by step the money for the renovation. So there's going to be project management that is required, and those are services that we are able to provide, and obviously the cost of those will be taken into account in the overall cost of the project. An important thing on the pooled BRR, the aim is obviously to give maximum confidence to people. That's also why on these I'm not coming in as a shareholder. And for full transparency, every shareholder has full access to the company accounts. So obviously the company has a bank account, and then the accounts showing all the income, expenditure, etc. And then obviously the annual accounts. It's not an obligation for when people take shares in a company to have access to that, but the way that we set it up, and we had a clause in the shareholders agreement, all shareholders have full access to the company accounts and can see how everything is worked out. We've already mentioned that we do have a contingency. We've got an example coming up in a moment. The contingency is in fact £2,000 plus 15% of the renovation costs. If we don't use that contingency, is carried over into the phase when we're renting out and getting the income for the property. And when we're renting out the property, if we're refinancing, which is generally the case, we make sure that we've got contingency which covers £2,000 for ongoing maintenance, and we also keep the equivalent of 6 months loan interest payments. So that means, for example, if we're let's say we've got £800 per month of rental income, we're going to keep, and the loan interest, let's say it's £400 per month. That's 2,400 we're keeping. So if we've got a problem with rental income, rental stops coming in for whatever reason, we've got enough money to cover the mortgage payments. And where possible, we set up a interest-bearing account. We're using often banks like, for example, Tide Bank. They have generally an interest-bearing, like a savings account, where you might get like 3% interest on it. The contingency we put in there, it's not a massive amount, but it's like just good practice to get the most out of everything and optimize things. And then property rental. So we're renting out the property and distributing the income every month. The income that is distributed, obviously, it's on a pro rata of how many shares each shareholder has. So in a simple example of 10 shareholders, £10,000 each, each shareholder is getting a tenth of the net income. And what is the net income? It's the income after all costs, so which include provisions for maintenance. If we need to top up the contingency because we've used it, like for example, maybe after a couple of years we need to replace a boiler, we're going to take money out of the contingency. So then we're going to build that up again. And we also need to take into account a provision for corporation tax, which is the company profit declared each year, typically in the first 2 or 3 years of operation. Because the renovation costs will be an expense for the company, we're not, even though there's actual net cash flow, so positive cash flow coming in, as regards the company accounts, there's not going to be a profit because we have to take into account the cost of the renovation. So it's only after 2 or 3 years that we're going to start accounting for and taking into account corporation tax, which practically means that as each year the rental income is going up a bit, generally at least with inflation, sometimes more because we're tracking market rents, then by the time we're starting paying corporation tax, we've got almost enough additional income to offset that. And yeah, the advantage, well, with the pooled BRR, then there is each year, there is a fee. It's around £1,000 to take into account the management and then doing the annual accounts and stuff like that. But all this is taken care of. It's not needed to have like detailed experience of how all this works. And not needed to have detailed experience, but if you're coming to this full BRR, you can also get that experience. You can see how things work. You'll see the accounts, so that down the line, if you're going to do your own, you can, yeah, it is like an earn and learn. Yeah, refinancing the property. So when it's finished, we're looking at refinance at 75% of the end value. And when that money is actually released, so that money is going to be paid from the lender back into the limited company, and then that income is distributed to each shareholder. So there's a lot actually in here, isn't there? But this is the last slide before we look at an example and see if there are any questions. So yeah, exit strategy and share buyback. So 5 years from the purchase date of the property. So not from the date that you buy the shares. Let's say you were to put 10,000 in to a company that we were already like setting up. Let's say now it's beginning of March, but we end up actually buying the property, let's say on the 15th of April. Then it's from the 15th April that those 5 years are going to start. So after 5 years, there's a guaranteed buyback option. So that means there's a possibility of basically getting the money plus the capital gain back. The value of the share in 5 years' time is going to be based on a new RICS evaluation of the property, but we also take into account for the value of the buyback. We take into account the corporation tax that we will pay if we were to sell the property, and also like we take into account is 5%, which are like fees for agency fees, accounting, and the fees that we'd normally have if we sell the property, close the company and give the money back to shareholders. So there's a fixed value that's defined, and the exact calculation is contained in the shareholders agreement. We're not leaving things to chance. We're taking into account everything that can happen. This is included in the shareholders agreement, so that we're not going into anything blind. We're going into anything knowing exactly how things are going to work. So we've got the buyback option. And how does it work? Let's say we've got 10 shareholders, again with the 10,000. And let's say 2 of them say we want to get our money out. Obviously, from that 10,000, the shareholders have already received the 80,000. And let's say if the property is now worth, I don't know, let's say 160,000, then it might be like something like 40,000 that needs to come back to each shareholder. So those that want to sell their shares, first option is other shareholders can buy those shares if they want to. Then we propose them to outside people who say, look, in this deal, we've got shares available. This is the ongoing income. This is what you get if you take on these shares. And if there's no one to buy them, then we've got the third option, which is because the value of the property will have increased over time, we can go back to the lender and say, can we get some more money out? And we can use the company can use that money to pay the people, the shareholders that want to buy back their shares. And then what happens is 2 people are out. So the remaining 8 people have in fact a higher share of the company. Instead of each having a 10% share, they end up having a 12.5% share. So there's additional income that goes to those shareholders. If, however, let's say 50 or 60% of the shareholders want to get out and there aren't enough people to buy those shares, then the last thing that can happen, number 4, is we'll put the property on the market, we'll sell it, and then all shareholders will receive their distribution of the net profit once we've sold it, paid the corporation tax and paid the fees to close the company. So this is how it works. And let's see. I think there aren't any looking on the chats. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, if you could put them on the chat now, whilst people are maybe thinking and putting some questions, I'm going to bring up an example. And in fact, this actually is a real example of one that we're looking to do. This is a property that we could either buy as part of the pool BRR if there's enough people in time for this one. We've also got people that signed up to the portfolio building service for which we're looking for properties, and it could also fit for a single investor purchase. So I'm going to stop this share and we're going to look at an example. Yeah, so what we see here is like a mid-terrace house that you can see in many areas of the country. This specific one is in a town in South Wales, probably about something like 15, 16 miles from Cardiff. So it's like commuting distance to Cardiff, but obviously house prices are quite a lot cheaper because it's not in the middle of nowhere, but it's it's not right in the in the capital. It takes about probably 40 minutes by train to get into the centre of Cardiff. There is a train station nearby. So this is typically what we're looking at, mid-terraced house. This house, if it's nicely done up, not to a massive high standard, but to a, let's say, adequate standard rental standard, is going to have an end value of 120,000. This one we're able to buy at 78,000, and we've got, I think it's a renovation cost of around 20,000. We'll look at the figures in a moment. So this is the house. If we go back to the first one, yeah, this is the floor plan. So we've got 3 bedrooms on the first floor. This bedroom might be a bit small. Sometimes we make them a bit bigger by moving a stud wall. We've got 2 reception rooms. Potentially, we might consider this, making one of these reception rooms into a additional bedroom, and that then could be operated as a mini HMO. So we've got different possibilities for this. And then if we go on, we've got a few photos. Obviously, yeah, if we look at that, we need to update the kitchen. So put a new kitchen in there, get rid of the old bathroom, put a new bathroom. This is the back garden, needs a bit of tidying up. And yeah, this is a speeded up video. Obviously, all the properties that we are sourcing, we're going to look at them ourselves. If necessary, go in there with one of our builders, checking everything out, and then doing the figures to see if it's a good deal. So yeah, just walking around. We've got the 3 bedrooms in here. 1, 2. Probably the next one is the outside. Yeah, and that's it. So yeah, the typical example of British mid-terraced house. Many of these available and in different areas. So let's look at the figures. So now let's have a look. Excel. Yeah, hopefully this isn't too small, but I'll be speaking as well. So in these files, we have everything included. So yeah, we don't leave anything out. So I said we've got a purchase price of 78,000. We've got stamp duty, sourcing fees, the company setup fee and the director's fee for the first year. That's 2,000. It's less in the following years. Obviously, when we're doing a full BRR, there are a few more costs, like management costs, than there are if you're doing it yourself. But it's still, so which means that the money out might be a little bit less, but it's only like 2 or 3% less. And it's a great way of getting into property. So we've got the sourcing fee, company setup fee, conveyancing, that's our solicitor's fees. If you're buying in auction, we've got the auction fees. So the money that we need, or that the company needs to buy the property, here it's 89,000. We've got just short of 20,000 renovation conversion costs. We've got a contingency of just short of 5,000, so that we haven't got to come back to the shareholders and say, look, we need a bit more money. We've got our holding costs. So the total money that we need in is 115,000. So in this case, we're setting up with shares of 500, but we're not selling less than 10 shares because you don't want like 100 different shareholders in there. Needs to be like sort of, yeah, reasonable size. So we're saying minimum of 5,000 to get into a deal like this. So we've got a total of 230 shares each, £500. And we've got an in value for the refinance. This one actually is 125,000. So, which actually means 544 per share. So on the end value, it's an increase of 8.8%. And then down here, we've got what happens with the refinance. So on the refinance, lending at 75% loan to value, we've got different lending fees, broker fees, and yeah, stuff like that. So at the end, we're going to be getting back 91,000. That is distributed to shareholders. Each £500 shareholder gets 397 back on this simulation, which is 79, as we're saying, 80% back. And there's £100 left in the deal. There's £100 left in the deal, but based on the new value, there's 127 of equity. So it is like positive equity in the deal. We've got a couple of sheets that we use for calculating the income if you're going to operating as HMO. Service accommodation, it doesn't apply in this case. So let's come back to our main sheet. So on the right here, if we're operating this as a standard buy-to-let, 850 is the expected rental income. We've got letting agency fees, company management fee, all the different expenditure. Net income before interest payments. So, and here we've got a net yield of 6%, which is fine. Gross yield is going to be something like 8 or 9%, standard for the area, some of the best that we can get in the UK. And yeah, 6.15% net yield. When we're taking into account the refinance, and obviously we've only got £100 left in for each £500 that we put in. So on that, we've got a cash flow after we take away the interest payments. Per share, we've got £1.18 monthly, and yeah, £14.12 per year. And so we've got, yeah, just short of 14% return on investment on the money that we left in, which is obviously massively better than we get if we leave our money in the bank. And if we're able to operate the property as an HMO, that will depend on the area. This one, I'm going to say it's like marginal. Maybe yes, maybe no. We need to look a little more into it. So here, if we're operating as an HMO, we've got income, obviously more expenditure because we're paying the utility bills, council tax, and these different things. So we've got the net income, which is still higher before the interest payments. So on this one, we've got 8% net yield on the end value. And we've got return on investment of the money we left in of 20%. So this is an example of how it works. Yeah, so in yellow is how it works for each shareholder. So yeah, we've got one pooled, well, we've got generally it's one at a time because we open one. I think there's 3 or 4 people that have already said that they want to come into a deal. I think most people with effectively £10,000. So there's, yeah, we probably need 3 or 4 more people to come in with between 10 and 20. And then we're ready to go and get the next pooled BRR and then the next one. So just looking, yeah, there aren't any questions here. So I'm going to close this. Yeah, don't hesitate to, let's stop the share. Yeah, don't hesitate to contact us. Let us know if you're interested, if you want more information, or if you want to receive, yeah, a copy of the simulation, the Excel file that we showed here, then we can share that with you. So yeah, thanks for your time and yeah, have a good rest of the evening.